The Pharisee and the tax collector. This is one of those parables that seems so simple. The self-righteous Pharisee is humbled. He's left out of God's grace. The humble tax collector is exalted. He's included in God's grace. This seems so obvious that several months ago, when I got together with Greg Kellison of our Interim Stewardship Committee to plan the timeline for this fall's pledge campaign, I looked at the readings for this Sunday and said, let's do Stewardship Sunday on October 23rd. I'll preach on the lesson from 2 Timothy. I can skip over the gospel. Boy, was I wrong. This parable is more complex than I ever realized. And it speaks more powerfully to stewardship and community and our life at St. John's than I ever imagined. Pharisees were one of the branches of Judaism in the first century. They were known for observing the Jewish law rigorously as an expression of their love for God. This can be difficult for Christians to grasp. We relish our freedom and think of the law as something to be thrown off. But a Pharisee's attitude was, God gave us the law out of love for us. I love God, so I want to do everything God asks of me. And I'll do even more than God asks, because that's what you do for love. So of course, this guy fasts twice a week, when only once a week is commanded. And of course, he gives a tenth of all his income, the tiny things like the herbs from his garden, as well as livestock and grain from his fields. What would have surprised Jesus' original audience is this Pharisee's judgment of the tax collector. God warns again and again that judgment belongs to God, not to human beings. The Pharisee is not obeying God as completely as he'd like to think. The tax collector is a surprise too. First century Jewish tax collectors were traitors to their people. They worked for the occupying Roman Empire, not the Jewish authorities. And tax collectors were allowed to keep any extra money they could squeeze out of people, which led to a lot of squeezing, a lot of extortion from their neighbors. Tax collectors are on the margins of society because that is where they have chosen to put themselves. You wouldn't expect to find them at the temple. God welcomes them, but not their fellow Jews. A crowd of the people you've betrayed has got to be an intimidating place for a traitor. This tax collector has come to some kind of self-awareness. He knows his own sinfulness. And if there's anywhere to atone for his sins, it's the temple. So that's where he goes. He stands far off, putting some distance between himself and others for his own well-being. And he asks for God's mercy. That's it. He does not promise to change. He does not promise to make restitution for anything he stole. Yet Jesus says, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. Or did Jesus really say that? The Gospels, like all of the New Testament, were written in Greek. And New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine says there is a critical mistranslation in that verse. The Greek word translated as rather than can also mean alongside. This man went down to his home justified alongside the other. Neither of these two really deserves God's mercy. The tax collector stole from and betrayed his people. The Pharisee was harsh and judgmental to a neighbor. Those sins are not equal, true. Yet, can we really say that one of them has earned grace and the other hasn't? I don't think so. God pours out mercy on both the Pharisee and the tax collector because that is who God is. As Levine says, divine grace cannot be limited. For to limit this grace would be to limit the divine. And as Matt Skinner says, grace is disgustingly undeserved. No one can earn God's love and mercy and forgiveness and blessing. That's the point. God chooses to bestow grace on Pharisee and tax collector alike. There's still another twist. Amy Jill Levine says that word translated as rather than or alongside can also mean because of. This man went down to his home justified because of the other. What we do, both good and bad, affects the community around us. The tax collector drags the community down with his betrayal and theft. The Pharisee lifts it up with his extra works of devotion. The Pharisee's faithfulness is enough to bring the tax collector along with him. Levine says it is like the middle school group project. In 5th grade, I had a group project to present a radio play of a Sherlock Holmes story. 4 of us in the group worked hard to divide parts, rehearse our lines, and master the school's clunky old tape recorder. It was the 1980s. But Bob Solomus goofed off the whole time. When our class broke out into group time, he didn't even show up. Who knows where he went? And you know what? Bob got an A along with the rest of our group. It was completely unfair. Somehow, it took me until last week to realize, 5th grade. Wasn't that the year Bob's father died? Maybe what seemed like a slacker getting the benefit of his classmates' hard work was actually a kid who was really hurting, who needed other people to bring him along with them. That's the nature of grace, that we don't get what we deserve. We get what God, who loves us unconditionally, wants to pour out upon us. And that's the nature of Christian community, that we carry each other. Sometimes we are the faithful Pharisee or the organizer of the group project, whose good work brings others along with us. And sometimes we are the repentant tax collector or the grieving kid who knows we can't be saved on our own, who depends on others to bring us along. Everyone belongs. Everyone is part of the community. Everyone receives God's abundant grace and love and mercy. We are saved alongside each other. We are saved because of each other. Belonging to the community of St. John's involves supporting this community with our prayers, our presence, our time, our talents, and our money. Pledges from all of you make up 3/4 of St. John's annual income. They pay for outreach and Christian formation for all ages, and music and pastoral care, along with the boring stuff like heat and lawn mowing. I thank those of you who have already made a pledge for 2023. And if you haven't yet, I ask you to support St. John's with a financial pledge for next year. Once again, a generous anonymous donor has offered a $50,000 match for all new or increased pledges. I would love for us to earn every dollar of the match. And I know that times are tough right now. Food and energy costs are soaring. And for some of us, we just can't give more this time. If you're in that situation, I understand. Please do what you can. St. John's is grateful for every pledge, no matter the size, and your participation is even more important than the dollar amount. At the same time, some of us can afford to increase our giving. And if you're in that situation, I ask you to do what you can. We will bring each other along to reach our goal together, because that's Christian community. We're saved alongside each other, because of each other. Bono, the singer of U2, observes that we get to carry each other. It's a privilege to bring others along and to be brought along. Whoever we are, whether we are as virtuous as a faithful Pharisee or as corrupt as a traitorous tax collector, we belong here. In God's economy, no one is left out. Everyone is included. With God, there is more than enough mercy and grace and forgiveness and love for all. For with God, all things are possible.